Hello everyone, welcome to my Evil Within, Akumu difficulty, no upgrade slash keys walkthrough, and this is chapter 10, The Craftsman's Tools. So this is another chapter that can prove to be very challenging for a lot of people because it's a rather lengthy chapter, and there are some pretty difficult fights in this chapter. I mean, I didn't die once on this whole entire chapter. I mean, I had to restart though, because I was making a lot of basic errors when it came to implementing the strategies. But I shouldn't have been making such basic errors in the first place. Like, I'm so overly confident in my ability to do this chapter without making a single error, and that just shows how much I had practiced this chapter. But I guess that overconfidence caused me to be a bit reckless with certain encounters. But this part right here, disable your lantern, and then disarm that bear trap, and disarm this trap. Wait for this guy to move, and then do a sneak kill on him. And you're gonna need to use the flash bolts to kill 2 enemies coming up. And once again, the way you do the double kill with the flash bolts when they're unupgraded is you do a sneak kill on the first guy from the front, and then for the next haunted, you have to do a sneak kill from behind, and that's the only spot where it will work, because they've recovered from the animation, but they're still in a stealth profile during the recovery animation, which is why that works. And that will work every single time. In fact, one cool thing you can definitely do with the flash bolts, but I haven't had the chance to test it out, is group together a bunch of enemies, use the flashbolt to stun the whole entire group, do a sneak kill on one haunted, and then use a match on his dead body, and you'll be able to burn all the haunted when they're grouped together. That's something that I've seen several opportunities to do, but I've just never followed up with it. And if that actually works, that will be really cool. Now, for this part, you can choose to wait for the fat haunted and the guy with the gun to move at just the right moment so that you can sneak kill both of them. But it's random as to how long it will take for them to actually do the right thing. So, instead of doing that, I'm just going to do this method here, where I throw the bottle in that corner the moment the fat guy decides to turn around. I'm going to fire the flashbolt and make sure they don't see me when I fire. And then I need to take out these enemies very quickly before they have a chance to spot me. If these enemies spot you, the enemies that are lying on the ground will come after you, and you'll end up wasting ammo. I mean, they're not too bad. You can use the shotgun rather liberally in this section. But for the purposes of this walkthrough, I try to make sure I'm not showcasing too many reckless strategies like that. So that's why I use that particular method. And there is another sniper, so go ahead and snipe him. And you don't even have to wait for him to fire. His head is just entirely exposed. And you're going to need to crouch on this part because these enemies will detect you if you're standing. So sneak past them and then grab the battery pack. As you make your way back down to the bottom level, there is going to be a haunted that spawns with an axe. There are times when he doesn't spawn, and I don't know what dictates this, but the best way to deal with him is to just use a flashbolt. It may seem like a waste to use one single flashbolt against one enemy, but it's the safest method for dealing with this guy because he is very quick to respond to you when you run around that corner. So I'm just going to drop down. I'm going to prematurely fire before getting around the corner, and he is dead. Now we're going to have to be very careful when crossing this room over here. There is a bear trap to your left that you can disarm for parts, but you've got to be very careful when disarming the bear traps in this room. Because of the fact that Sebastian stands up a little bit when he's first starting the animation and when he ends the animation, you can accidentally kill yourself with the blade if you time it wrong. So wait until the blade passes overhead and then disarm the bear trap. And when you mantle over this wall over here, there are 2 enemies. I'm going to use the bottle to stun this one enemy. And then for the second enemy, I'll just use my pistol. And you want to mainly shoot around the crouch area, because that's the area that seems to guarantee that the haunted will do that animation. And that is definitely the best animation you need the haunted to be in, because they're stuck in a standing position for quite a long time during that particular flinch animation. And if you don't get the correct flinch animation and the enemies are relatively close to you, just mantle back over the wall, and most likely the enemies will kill themselves trying to get to you when they decide to mantle over the wall. But all of the noise that we just made in that room does not appear to have been heard by these enemies. So this is a unique section where for some reason, even though I was relatively close to these enemies, they just did not hear me. But this is beneficial because I'll be able to sneak kill these enemies without wasting a single bullet. Watch out for this guy. This guy has a gun, so you gotta make sure he's in the right position before going in for the sneak kill. And he is dead. Before putting the battery pack in, make sure you break this window because there will be a sniper that spawns when you place his battery pack inside, and you've got to prepare for him. It can be very hard to tell if the window is broken or not, so that's why you always have to make sure this window is broken before the sniper comes in. But he is dead, and Remain crouched at all times so that this guy doesn't notice you, and just break these crates so that you can potentially get some ammo. But I like this little section with the carousel and then the music that plays. That kind of music that plays is perfectly symbolic of the madness that Sebastian is going through right now, and it definitely showcases the instability of Ruvik, because, of course, madness is a term associated with the most unstable of individuals. And such individuals who succumb to madness can easily be described as being off in La La Land. And what better song to be associated with La La Land than that song that carousel is playing?
What the?
I gotta give credit to Shinji Mikami for coming up with the idea for that section. But that right there was a new enemy type, and you can actually kill that enemy type if you decide to drop from the ladder. And you can actually sneak kill him. But dropping down the ladder will actually make noise, and he will be alerted to you. So the best way to kill that guy, if you want to try to do so, is to run past him while he's in his alert animation, and then you need to hide in the room to my left that has the spikes on the ceiling. He'll lose you, and then while his back is to you, you just run up behind him and press R1 and X to do the sneak kill. And yes, you can run up behind him because that enemy type is very slow to turn around whenever you decide to run behind him and do the sneak kill. And that enemy type is normally supposed to die after 2 sneak kills, but that one guy is a unique exception where he only dies from 1 sneak kill, which is very interesting that they let you do that for that particular trauma. I saw K-Hunk do that, and I was so surprised. I was half tempted to actually include that trauma kill as part of the walkthrough, but it just takes a little too long, and I didn't want to make this chapter a little bit longer than it perhaps should. And by the way, that strategy just then, I used 2 bottles to get these 4 enemies to this spot, but when they are alerted to me, some of the enemies that are lying on the ground will actually get up off the ground. And if they decide to come after me, I'm going to hide in this room over here, and I'm going to wait for them to bust down the door, investigate my last one position, and then path back into the room. And while they're pathing back into the room, I'm going to try to sneak kill them. For the most part, when you're trying to get the sneak kills on these enemies, you'll only get 1 sneak kill. The rest of the enemies will just be back in that room very quickly, and they will just go to default positions within that room. And this is actually very helpful, because then I'll be able to track where the enemies are, and I'll be able to respond to them accordingly. On this recording, this guy was the only one to bust down the door in order to investigate my last known position, so I'm just going to wait for him to investigate, and then when he decides to go back into the room, I'm just going to sneak kill him. Something you need to bear in mind, whenever you have multiple enemies coming out of that door, there is a high possibility that they're going to get stuck on the door, because they can't seem to take into account the fact that the door is in their way, so they never try to path around the door, and instead they just walk into the door. If that happens, trying to get the sneak kill on them is very hard to do, and oftentimes what I do try to do whenever there are enemies stuck on the door is I wait for the enemy that I'm trying to sneak kill to be near the door, so that when I sneak kill him, I can get the attention of the other haunted that's stuck on the door, and then use my match to kill it. And if that doesn't work, I just use my shotgun to get rid of the stragglers. In this room here, there are a couple of traps that you gotta avoid or just disarm, and there's also a freeze bolt. And something you need to bear in mind with this room, the kind of enemy types that you'll potentially be dealing with in this room are randomized. So on this recording, there was no fat haunted, but on other playthroughs of this section, there could be a fat haunted or any other enemy type. Like, I think the female haunted is affected as well. There are times when the female haunted doesn't spawn on this section. It doesn't really affect the overall approach to the strategy, but it's very interesting that it happens. And there is a wire trap. You can obviously tell that wire trap is there because of the blood particles circling around the wire trap. And then there are a couple of matches over here in case you need them, and also a grenade to your right. I obviously don't need to get the grenades because the last time I used the grenades was back in Chapter 6. So I've had plenty of time to amass 3 grenades, which I have. And if you've been following this walkthrough, you most assuredly have done the same. But we are now making our way over to the part where we need to turn on the power, and there's going to be a bunch of enemies closing in on us. This is definitely the point in Chapter 10 where it gets kind of tricky. It's definitely the part of Chapter 10 that trips up a lot of people. But it wasn't that much of a problem for me. So after inserting the battery pack and turning on the power, the Haunted are going to spawn. For the first fight against the Haunted, I'm going to use the Shock Bolt. I originally used the Shotgun, but the Shock Bolt is way better for a consistent strategy against these guys. And there's actually a random element to this fight, and you heard it just then. One of the Haunted killed themselves on the blade trap directly ahead of me. If they kill themselves on that blade trap, you have 1 less Haunted to deal with, and instead you have to do it 3 Haunted. If not, you'll have to do it 4, but it's not that much of a difference. So go ahead and use the shock bolt and burn these guys to a crisp. Now what we're going to have to do is deal with one trauma that is going to come after us. You do not want to underestimate the traumas on this game. Whenever the traumas do their running attack, they have some ridiculous tracking. It's about as ridiculous as the Disciples' charge attack from the Evil Within 2. They will take some of the sharpest turns ever. They can hit you at right angles. It's crazy. So you have to make sure there's a wall in between yourself and the trauma so that he doesn't kill you very quickly. And I'm going to use a freeze bolt against this trauma, which is completely unnecessary. What I should have done is lured this trauma back to the beginning of this room so that it takes him a while to get back to me when I'm trying to pull the switch. And this is important. The moment you pull the switch, you gotta run to the right now. If you hesitate, you're just going to screw yourself. I hesitate for whatever reason, and this trap blocks my way for a couple of seconds. And there are some haunted, and how I don't get hit is just beyond me. And then watch this. I nearly get grabbed by this haunted. So, don't make my mistake. Immediately run for this passageway the moment you pull the switch so that you don't put yourself in a bad spot. And then watch out for these traps, and then get under here, and then climb the ladder. And that is the end of that section, but that's not the hard part of Chapter 10. We're about to make our way over to the hardest part of Chapter 10 that trips up so many people. And I say it's hard, but it's actually not that hard because I have the ammo necessary to do this section. And it's the section that has the two traumas in it. The main reason why this upcoming section is very difficult for a lot of people is because they have a lot of trouble figuring out how to best deal with the traumas, to actually get past them, and to open a door, which takes forever to open while they're alive. And I'm about to show you the best possible way to do this strategy. So, in the beginning, when you drop down into this room, there's going to be a haunted and a trauma directly in front of you. I'm going to wait for just the right moment where the haunted is not looking around, and instead he's just going to be looking forward. There we go. So I'm going to try to get behind him, and I'm going to do the sneak kill. By the time I've done the sneak kill, I'll have plenty of time to get back into cover, and the trauma will not see me. I mean, even when I'm not going into cover, this trauma will never spot me because of the direction he's facing in, and the peripheral vision isn't really the best. But this is important. After sneak killing this haunted, you have to disable the bear trap, because when you're trying to lure the second haunted over towards you, if he triggers the bear trap, the enemies will know exactly where you are for some reason, and it's rather confusing, so you got to bear that in mind when you're trying to do the strategy. And throw the bottle in that spot over there, so that he comes over to where you are, and the moment he decides to go back to where he was, I'm going to sneak kill him. And something to note, the trauma actually heard the bottle, but for some reason, whenever you use a bottle on this section, the trauma is so delayed when it comes to investigating the source of the sound. So he'll path around the room for a little bit, and then eventually he's going to come over to where I am and investigate the source of the sound, and he'll try to break some crates in his way when he's trying to get over to where you are. So I'm just going to wait him out. You don't have to do the sneak kill method against the haunted. I mean, what you can do is just take out your sniper rifle and just snipe this haunted, because regardless of what you do, you have to engage in combat with the traumas in order for them to be lured into this room. And that is what my strategy revolves around. What I'm going to do for my strategy is I'm going to make myself known to the traumas. I'm going to plant a shock bolt in this room that I'm in right now when both of the traumas decide to show up. And then when they gain line of sight with me, they're going to do their charge attack, but they're going to do the charge attack into the shock bolt, and the shock bolt will stun them. And then when they're both stunned, I'm going to run past them, I'm going to plant some additional shock bolts along the way, so that when I'm going to turn the wheel, they can't close in on me too quickly. And that right there was very unfortunate. That trauma saw me while I was trying to melee the crate, which I was not expecting, so I'm going to have to improvise a little bit, because this one trauma is going to close in on me very quickly. And how I'm going to bide my time is I'm going to make sure I'm staying behind the trauma so that he just constantly turns, because he works off a tank control based system when it comes to his movement. That right there was very dangerous. That's the one thing you got to bear in mind when it comes to standing behind the traumas. They do have a get away from me attack whenever you're behind them. But the strategy is working out perfectly. I've stunned both the traumas, and now I'm planting the rest of my shock bolts along this path so that they'll get stunned. And there we go. You have to turn this wheel about 5 times, and it takes forever to do so. And the trauma is making his way towards me right now. On my handgun / consumable only run of this game, I had to kill these traumas, and killing the traumas isn't too bad so long as you have a couple of grenades, an axe, and you're using the explosive traps in that room intelligently so that you're dealing damage. And when you get to this switch, you've got to pull it in order to open the way back to this area. And you don't have to actually pull the switch. What you can do is crouch and then hug the wall on the right-hand side so that you can bypass the trap without having to pull the switch. It's very, very helpful. So, there you have it. That is the best way to do that strategy. And the reason why I'm waiting here is because there's a flashbulb back in the room. So, I'm going to wait for this drama to go away, and then I'm going to pick up the flashbulb over here. And you can take the time to kill these enemies by doing sneak attacks on them. And like I mentioned before, it takes 2 sneak attacks in order to kill these enemies. So what you can do is perform the first sneak attack on the trauma, run back into this room, get him to lose you, and then when he decides to turn around, sneak kill him. And just repeat that for the second trauma, and you will gain 6,000 green gel in the process. And I should probably clarify on something. I said before that the traumas work off an almost tank control based system, and what I mean by this is that when they're moving around, they don't have the most fluid of movements. The movement they do is kind of rigid, similar to how in the older Resident Evil games your movement was very rigid, where you had the tank control based system, and it was very hard to make fluid movements. Because of the fact that the traumas have this particular style of movement, it makes it very easy to get away from them, and it makes it very easy to control their behavior by placing yourself in just the right position where they're going to have a very hard time getting to you. And the Wikipedia for this enemy type is wrong on one particular aspect of the traumas. For some reason, on the Wikipedia page for this particular enemy type, it says that the traumas are blind, similar to how the Garradors were blind in Resident Evil 4, but that is not true whatsoever. I stood in front of a trauma to see if this was true, and the trauma just saw me. So I have no idea who came up with this idea that the traumas are blind, but whoever they are an idiot. The fallibilities associated with some of these Wikipedia pages for certain games are just completely prevalent, and it's all because of the fact that people play on like easier difficulties and they have no idea how to deliver proper information whatsoever. Like, I have to edit the Resident Evil fandom so much because the amount of misinformation when it comes to gameplay aspects for certain enemies, or with how difficulty levels affect enemy behavior or affect certain strategies for certain sections, it's just too much. So, for the most part, the Wikipedia pages aren't really that helpful when it comes to finding a strategy. And once again, this is due to the fact that the people editing the Wikipedia pages are people who play on easier difficulties, and people who play the game only once, and then they just go on to another game. Like, you can't rely on such people when it comes to strategies, and that's what I'm here for, to help you guys have an easier time with Akumu difficulty, to help you guys understand this game on a technological level, and to help you understand how to enjoy this game when you're not being so over-reliant upon upgrades, or on keys, or on anything that just kind of breaks the balance of the game. And a lot of people consider Akumu difficulty to be a very broken difficulty, but it's not a broken difficulty, it's just an easily misunderstood difficulty. Akumu difficulty is one of the best difficulties ever made, and doing no upgrades / keys is the best way to play on Akumu difficulty, because it just feels like a more balanced experience, where you yourself are experiencing a challenge, but at the same time, the game feels very fair on this difficulty. And this is the final encounter with Laura right here. So, in the beginning, we're going to have to make our mad dash for it. Watch out for that explosive trap, so you're going to have to crouch, disarm this bear trap, and then you're going to need to shoot the explosive trap directly behind you, and then you're going to need to pull the switch to disable the fire. When you do pull the switch, Laura's going to come out of the incinerator behind you, so you're going to need to train Laura around this room and just remain crouched. Try not to move too fast, because otherwise she'll just run towards you. And there is an opportunity for you to shoot a couple of valves on the ceiling that emit fire, and when she gets hit by the fire, it of course burns her because she's vulnerable to fire. But there's no reason to do it. Like, she has so much life, and the only possible way you're going to kill her is if you have a lot of explosive bolts, or if you're on New Game Plus, where you have access to the rocket launcher, the machine gun, and also the brass knuckles if you actually beat Akumu difficulty. If you do kill Laura on this chapter, you will get a trophy. And also, if you want to get the trophy for getting all the locker keys, you have to kill Laura on this section, because one of the locker keys is near the elevator that you use to escape the whole entire fight, and if you decide to leave Laura alive, there's no way to get the locker key because it just cues the cutscene of you getting inside the elevator. The moment you kill Laura, the cutscene will not trigger, and you'll be able to gain access to the locker key. And that right there, you've got to immediately shoot that valve the moment you get to that spot. Because Laura will always run towards you when you're far enough away from her, and she will end up running into the fire. And when she decides to come after you, you're going to need to circle this room, and there is some rifle ammo that I just went past, in case you need it. But just circle this room. There's no point in sprinting, because you have to wait this out a little bit so that the fire will go away. And the fire is gone right now, so go to the right, and be careful not to run too far, otherwise you'll get burned. And then shoot that valve to disable the fire. So, this part right here, I had to restart the checkpoint because I messed up on the method that I was going to use against Laura. But you got to be very fast on this part. So, in the beginning, you're going to need to go to the left, and you're going to need to disarm this bear trap, and then you need to shoot this valve over here with either the pistol or the shotgun. I recommend the shotgun if you have enough ammo for it, because you get screwed very easily by the random variable on the pistol on this section if you're far enough away from these valves. And when she decides to run towards you, you can either choose to lure her to her body and then use a match to stun her, or you can try to dodge her, because her grab is very easy to dodge. And that was very dangerous, but I managed to get past it. And you've got to be very fast here, so you can stun her with the match. It's important you do so. After stunning her with the match, shoot that explosive trap, and then you've got to shoot this valve over here. You only need to shoot the valves that have a stream of fire near them, because those are the valves that contribute to progress for this encounter. So in this case, when I shot that valve, the fire that was blocking the switch was disabled. So pull that switch, and then all you got to do is just train Laura around this room and wait for the fire that's blocking your path to be disabled. And be careful not to get too close to Laura. Her grab move is very easy to dodge if you just move to the right, but when it comes to her horizontal slash, it's a little bit harder to dodge, and she's about to do it right here. That was very close just then, but I managed to get away from it. And she did her grab, but I was able to get past it, and the fire has been disabled, and that is the end of this combat encounter, and we won't be seeing Laura ever again. And I'm going to skip ahead to the part where we teleport to the garage, and we're going to fight the Amalgam Alpha, who is a boss that I absolutely love. This is one of the best boss fights in this game, and every single boss fight in this game is fantastic. But this one, there's just a lot to this boss fight. And one cool thing that's unique to this boss fight is that you can actually stealth the first phase. So you can do the entire first phase in stealth by only shooting his eyeball with the sniper rifle, and then for the second phase, where he just knows exactly where you are, he has less health, so you can easily finish him off with just the freeze bolt, a sniper rifle shot, and a couple of explosive bolts. Like, this boss fight is one of the best boss fights ever made in survival horror history, because it's a lethal but fair boss. Like, this guy is pretty terrifying when he detects you in the first phase. When he detects you in the first phase, he runs so fast, and his tracking is impeccable. So you have to make sure you don't put yourself in a spot where he's going to detect you very easily. But here he comes. You can choose to run towards him just to start the fight a little bit quicker, but I just choose to run away from him because this just feels like the kind of thing Sebastian would do. And he knocks you over. And Sebastian is going to hide behind this column over here, and this is where the stealth phase is going to begin. And for the stealth phase, how this is going to work is when he is trying to search for you, he's going to pull out an eyeball, and when he sees you with that eyeball, he's going to start charging after you. He will also start charging after you if you get too close to him, or if you shoot any other body part that is not his eyeball. And he's pulled out the eyeball right now. He will always pull out the eyeball at this point right here. So I'm going to shoot it with the sniper rifle. Make sure you stand away from him after stunning him in this part, because for some reason, when you're just standing near the column, it's almost like the game's interpreting you as being very close to him, so he just detects you. That's why you gotta take a few steps back. And now, he's going to pull out his eyeball there, and I'm going to shoot it once again. The amount of times you have to shoot his eyeball is equal to the amount of sniper rifle shots you have in your reserve. So for instance, if you have 4 shots in your reserve, you have to shoot his eyeball 4 times, and then you're going to need to swap to the harpoon bolts or the pistol. The reason why you need to do this is to conserve on your sniper rifle rounds, because you will get back a couple of sniper rifle rounds in this boss fight, and you will also get back a couple of sniper rifle rounds in the next chapter, so you will be able to have a full stock of sniper rifle ammo. And right now, the boss is being random with when he is choosing to pull out that eyeball, and that right there is new. So he can choose to either raise his eyeball up near the ceiling or lower it to the ground. You've got to read his animation to know which position he's going to place his eyeball out. And I've dealt enough damage to his eyeball, so the second phase begins. And I'm about to make a mistake coming up. So I assumed that when you freeze him, it would always expose the eyeball. But it turns out, upon starting the second phase, he has to knock over some cars, like he has to let out some aggression before he decides to come after you, and for the eyeball to actually expose itself. So right now the eyeball has exposed itself. You need to freeze him with the freeze bolts, shoot it with the sniper rifle, and then finish him off with a couple of explosive bolts, and that will be the end of this amazing boss fight. That right there is a Shinji Mikami boss. That is perfect. If there's one thing I can appreciate about the bosses on this game compared to Resident Evil 4, it's that every single boss fight on this game is phenomenal. There isn't a single one that is bad. Compared to Resident Evil 4, where certain bosses like Salazar, for instance, were awful. The reason why Salazar was such a pathetic boss fight on Resident Evil 4 was because he was so limited in his movesets. He had some really bad hitboxes on his attacks. The quick-time events for that boss fight were very awkward. The Plaga-type Cs that supported him in that boss fight were one of the worst enemies ever in that game. And finally, Salazar himself had way too much life. The fact that they settled on that for a penultimate showdown with Salazar, and they've been building up Salazar so much in Resident Evil 4, it's just so baffling to me. I don't think Shinji Mikami had any input whatsoever when it came to designing that boss fight. There is no reason why Salazar should be a pathetic boss fight compared to some of the other bosses on Resident Evil 4, or every single boss on this game. Every single boss in this game is phenomenal because the bosses die very fast, and when you're saving specific resources for specific boss fights, you really feel rewarded in the end with how quickly the bosses die. Like for instance with the Quell boss fight in Chapter 14, I only ever utilize a fully loaded Magnum plus a couple of shock bolts in order to deal with the boss, because doing that will absolutely obliterate the Quell. And he will die in less than a minute, and that is exactly how a survival horror boss fight should feel, because survival horror is all about saving your resources. And when your resources feel like they aren't doing anything because the bosses are dragging out for such a long time, where is that survival horror aspect? It just doesn't make any sense, and that is exactly what Salazar felt like, and that's why he was such a miserable fight. But that is the end of Chapter 10. Stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.